Some doors open on their own. I've been here for years, but I still don't feel like this farm truly belongs to me. I never wanted to come here in the first place, but Bruno did. A quieter life surrounded by nature, away from all the chaos. That was his dream, and I was too exhausted to say no. After years in the city, the silence here sometimes feels like a remedy, sometimes like a punishment. Bruno often leaves for the city to take care of business while I stay here, staring at the endless fields, becoming just another part of the scenery. From the outside, everything looks peaceful, exactly as it should be, but inside me something keeps growing, a hollow space that only gets deeper. Today was no different. I'd woken up early, taken care of a few things, then stretched out on the large lounge chair on the porch, closing my eyes. The soft breeze brushed against my skin, and behind my closed lids, my mind drifted. I thought about the past, my youth, my energy, the excitement I used to feel. And then I heard it. First, the distant hum of an engine, then footsteps on the gravel path. I opened my eyes and saw a familiar silhouette walking toward me. For a second I thought Bruno had come back early, but no, it was Alex. That moment something shifted inside me. Alex was Bruno's distant relative, but he felt like he was always around. He was good with his hands, used to farm life, always willing to help. But that wasn't what made him stand out. Every time he came here he brought something else with him, energy, movement, a certain kind of fire. His golden wavy hair was tousled slightly by the wind. His fair skin glowed under the sun, and those green eyes, sharp and piercing, had a way of drawing attention without even trying. He was young, strong, and with that confidence of his, he was impossible to ignore. He smiled when he saw me. "Brittany, seeing you like this, all relaxed, looks like farm life is treating you well," he said, grinning. I squinted at him. "What are you doing here? You know Bruno's gone to the city, right?" He tilted his head slightly. "Yeah, I know, but my bike had a little issue on the way. This was the closest place, so I thought I'd stop by and maybe see you before I head out." His bike, a mechanical problem. Was it really a coincidence, or was Alex, as always, just using an excuse? I watched him. This boy had a way of making me feel noticed. A casual compliment here, a lingering glance there, little gestures that meant nothing on their own, but together they told a different story. Maybe I had been ignoring the meaning behind them all this time, but this time felt different because Bruno wasn't here. Because that buried part of me, the part one had kept hidden for so long, was stirring. Alex stepped onto the porch and sat in the chair beside me. His eyes locked onto mine, that familiar teasing smirk on his lips. "It's been a while since we had coffee together, Brittany. Care to join me?" Coffee. Just coffee. Inside me there was already a feeling with blurry boundaries. Alex was here unexpectedly, with some excuse. He had shown up, and I was starting to question whether his visit was really just a coincidence. Before this story goes any further, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss a single confession. By the end of this story, we're all going to be on edge, and I'll be waiting for you in the comments. That day, as we sat on the porch sipping our coffee, I noticed the look in Alex's eyes. We had never been alone like this before. We had always had Bruno around or been busy with farm work, sharing short conversations here and there, but this was different. For the first time it was just the two of us. He started the conversation, he led it. At first it was about casual things, the farm, the weather, whether I ever thought about moving back to the city. But then the conversation shifted. "Isn't it hard being out here all alone, Brittany?" Something inside me stirred. His eyes were locked onto mine, waiting for my answer. "Sometimes," I admitted honestly. He smiled. "I figured," he murmured. Then he took a sip of his coffee, tilted his head slightly, and looked at me. "But somehow being alone makes you even more beautiful. I don't get how a woman can stay this stunning." I gripped my mug tighter. What I had just heard wasn't a simple compliment. There was warmth in his voice, seriousness in his eyes. He wasn't joking. I felt something burn inside me, but I laughed to cover it up. He laughed too. Our laughter echoed in the air, but we both knew it wasn't just laughter. That whole day we were more open than ever before. We talked like we were meeting each other for the first time. It all felt so natural that I didn't even notice how quickly time passed. Somehow, Alex found a way to stay longer, and I didn't question it. His visits became more frequent. Every time he came to the farm, he would find some excuse to stick around, helping Bruno with this and that. But I had caught on. He wasn't just here for Bruno. First, it was little things. While he worked outside, I would sit on the porch and watch him. Sometimes I could tell he noticed because he'd turn around and look at me. Then came the excuses to step inside. Just grabbing some water, he'd say, walking into the kitchen. Brittany, mind making some tea, he'd ask. And every time he stayed just a little longer. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes even more. Our conversations turned into a game. The air between us had changed. There was something bigger hiding beneath the small talk, but neither of us said it out loud until that day Alex had walked into the kitchen again. At that moment, I was in my bedroom changing my shirt. I hadn't closed the door. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't even realize it. Felt a gaze. When I turned around, Alex was in the kitchen. We didn't lock eyes, but I felt something shift inside me. A voice in my head whispered, "Go talk to him." And so I walked toward the kitchen. Was it shame? Curiosity? What was this strange excitement stirring inside me? When I reached the doorway, Alex turned to me. There was no guilt in his eyes. On the contrary, he smiled, warmer, more confident. That was the moment I realized everything between us had turned into an even bigger secret. And the day Bruno wasn't around, the day Alex came back, that day there would be nothing left to hide. I already knew that night would change everything. Bruno going fishing meant I'd be alone on the farm. At first, I was fine with it. He had been doing this for years. But there was something unsettling inside me. Something I couldn't quite explain. Alex hadn't been around for a while. First, he had caught my attention, then with every visit, he made sure I felt his presence. Even with Bruno around, he always found a way to get close to me. But now it felt like he had come back to make his final move. When the power went out, I stepped onto the porch in my nightgown. Power outages on the farm were rare, but when they happened, things could get complicated. I wandered out into the night, heading toward the breaker box to check the fuses. And that was when I heard it. Brittany. Froze. My heart pounded wildly in my chest. Alex was standing right there at the entrance to the farm. In the dim light. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his voice, his presence, made me hold my breath. "This is too much," I whispered to myself. I instinctively took a step back. "Alex, what are you doing here?" He chuckled. He was calm, as if being here was the most normal thing in the world. "Just passing through," he said casually. I didn't believe him. My eyes stayed on him. I knew Alex wouldn't lie to me, but he was making excuses. "Really?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "You just happened to be passing through." He shrugged. "Yeah, my way just led me here. And besides, it's been a while. I missed you." And there it was. That sentence, clear, direct, unapologetic, a confession. I couldn't say anything. The power issue wasn't even on my mind anymore. But Alex, without taking his eyes off me, glanced around. "What's the problem?" For a second I didn't know what to say. The power went out. I checked the fuses, but I couldn't figure out the issue. Alex scanned the area, then suddenly turned toward the yard. "The irrigation pump," he said in a firm voice. "If it pulls too much load, it can trip the main fuse." I hadn't even thought of that, but he was already on it. We walked over to where the pump was. Alex checked the wires and connections. He thought for a few seconds, then unplugged it and told me to try resetting the main fuse. Unplug it, then try again. If that's the issue, it should be fixed right away. I went inside and flipped the switches. The power came back on. When I walked to the door, Alex was looking at me. He smiled slightly. "Problem solved," he said with a shrug. But that wasn't the only thing that had been solved. We walked inside and sat down. Alex took a deep breath and relaxed, but as I sat next to him, a storm was raging inside me. We were close, too close. I leaned in just a bit more, locking my eyes directly on his. Nothing happens by coincidence, does it, Alex? And he just smiled without saying a word. At that moment, his smile started to fade. Alex raised his eyebrows at me. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice still calm, but I could sense a slight tension beneath it. I shifted slightly, letting my knee brush against his leg as I got into a more comfortable position. "I mean this, Alex. The first time you showed up here you said your bike broke down, but then you left without even really checking on it. And now here you are at this hour, right when Bruno is gone. Almost like you were waiting for another chance to come by when he wasn't around." Alex didn't say anything. His eyes were locked onto mine. I continued, "And for a while now, the way you act when you're here." I trailed off, studying his face. He was still silent. He took a deep breath, but he wasn't rushing to defend himself. "All right then," I said, softening my voice just slightly but keeping the challenge in my eyes. "That day when I was changing in my room and I saw you in the kitchen, why did you act so normal?" I paused, my gaze narrowing. "Did you see?" For a split second, Alex's face tensed with surprise. He was good at hiding things, so good, but that tiny flicker of tension in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. I lifted my hand from my glass and gently placed it on his knee. "You know, Alex, I never felt shy watching you this much, but now maybe I should," I said with a playful smirk. He took a deep breath and slightly nodded. "Brittany, you're really aware of everything, aren't you?" I gave him a knowing look. "And what are you aware of, Alex?" At that moment, he leaned his arm slightly against mine, his voice dropping. "Do you even know what you want?" he asked slowly. "Uriel, you keep complaining about it. Bruno's indifference, this boring farm." His eyes studied my face more carefully, the green in them glowing even brighter under the dim light. "I can see it in your eyes. You don't want to lose that fire inside you," he murmured. "And you know, even before this farm, there was always something different about the way you looked at me." A warmth spread inside me. I hadn't felt this way in so long. At that moment, the space between us started to disappear. Alex slowly leaned in closer, and I didn't say a word because there was nothing left to say. Silence pulled both of us in. Our eyes were locked, and the tension between us had become almost tangible. Our breathing grew heavier, but neither of us made the first move. Then Alex tilted his head slightly. His eyes dropped to my lips, and instinctively I leaned in too. At that moment, logic, morals, rules, they all vanished into thin air and we kissed. At first it was slow, cautious, but as we both realized what we truly wanted, it became more desperate, more intense. Every second of loneliness, every buried emotion, every ignored desire, it was all there, wrapped inside that moment. Alex pulled back slightly, his eyes still locked on mine. I knew he could still taste me on his lips. "I guess this is what we both wanted," he whispered. My breathing was uneven, my heart pounding in my chest. "I guess so," I admitted, my voice raw with truth. There was no more space between us. His hands gripped my waist, slowly pulling me closer. The warmth inside me only grew stronger. Every move he made, every glance he gave me filled the empty I hadn't even realized I had. Before I even knew it, I was lying back on the couch, my head rested against a cushion, my eyes drifting toward my nightgown on the floor. A shiver ran through me at the realization of what was happening. I looked up at Alex, now standing over me. There was a question in his eyes, a curiosity, maybe even the relief of finally letting go of what he had been holding back. And for the first time I didn't want to think, I just wanted to feel. That was when I realized it wasn't just my nightgown on the floor. One by one, Alex's clothes were disappearing too, sending a rush of heat through my body. My breathing quickened, and my fingers gripped the edge of the couch, trying to steady myself against the trembling. Alex leaned over me, his warm breath brushing against my skin, making me shut my eyes for a moment. His voice, low and rough, sent shivers down my spine. "You're so beautiful, Brittany," he murmured, his fingertips tracing gently down my cheek. I opened my eyes, and in that moment I felt something break inside me. There was no turning back now. Maybe I had wanted to reach this point all along. "And you're so handsome, Alex," I said, my voice trembling, but my words were nothing but the truth. "I used to watch you working in the yard. And I always imagined this." Alex's eyes narrowed slightly, as if every word I said fueled him even more. Slowly, he placed one knee onto the couch, his hand sliding over my waist. That strong touch sent waves of heat rippling through me. "Did you really?" he whispered, bringing his face even closer to mine. I gave a slight nod, my eyes never leaving his lips. And then, without a moment of hesitation, he kissed me again. This time, his kiss was hungry, desperate, as if every hidden feeling between us was melting into this moment. My fingers instinctively tangled into his hair, pulling him even closer. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was only feeling. I felt something huge inside me. It was kind of like a surprise. "This isn't just a coincidence," I laughed at Alex. Alex looked at me and said, "This is the biggest coincidence, Brittany. You're wrong." And he laughed. "Yes, really a big surprise," I said, and we laughed together. We were getting along so well. Even now we were so in sync. Everything was perfect. My palms gripped the edge of the couch even tighter, trying to stop my trembling. My legs tensed, giving me away. At that moment, Alex and I locked eyes, both of us breathless. We smiled, understanding each other in silence. For the first time, I was the one who broke the silence. My voice was loud, almost too loud. My body felt like it was floating toward the ceiling, and it was because of Alex. "Alex, is this real?" "Yes," Alex replied, more real than ever. "What are we doing?" said. Alex fell silent for a moment, then asked, "Aren't you happy with this reality?" Slowing his movements. "I'm very happy, Alex," I said. "Then let's make it feel even more real," Alex said. When he finally let himself go completely, I felt a deep warmth inside me. I was shocked. It was written all over my face, but I didn't say a word. I just whispered, "Thank you." When morning came, things were about to get even more exciting. I woke up and went straight to the kitchen to see if Alex was there. He looked at me for a long moment. "Don't worry, I'm here," he said, and I felt relieved. Without thinking, I went to hug him just naturally. This story isn't over yet. Don't forget to follow me and subscribe to my channel for the next part. By turning on notifications and leaving a comment, you'll always be one step ahead with these stories. Your support means everything. Thank you for listening this far.